Greetings galactic citizens, and welcome to this video discussing the Outer Rim pilot deck. In the core game there are 10 identical Outer Rim pilot cards that are gathered in step 6 of setup and placed between the galaxy row and the balance of the force track. Because these are neutral cards, they are at right angles to each other. Any player may spend resources to purchase one of these cards instead of a card in the galaxy row. Design-wise, these exist to mitigate any slow starts, as through random chance it is possible for the galaxy road to consist entirely of 7 or 8 cost cards which no one can afford. Because these are neutral, you or your opponent can't sabotage or bounty hunt them, and as there are no rewards for doing so, why would you even want to? Even with the optional rules for buying off neutral cards, there are 10 copies. The pilot costs 2 resources, so you can purchase at least 1 copy with your opening hand no matter how it shuffles, and maybe 2 or even 3 copies if you are the rebel player with a bonus resource. He costs 2 and generates 2 resources, meaning he pays for himself in a single play. Unlike say Chronicle or Leah, who you would need to play 3 times in order to recoup their cost. For every Outer Rim pilot you purchase, consider exiling one of your starting shuttles, as you are effectively doubling the resource production of that particular card slot. He has no traits, meaning he won't receive upgrades from Endor or the Imperial Carrier or their Rebel equivalents. The only other thing he does is exile himself and provide 1 force while doing so. Both of these are great abilities, so let's look at each part separately. That 1 force point could be all it takes to move from neutral to your side of the force and enable the force powers on your cards. Likewise, 1 force point could be all it takes to move the balance of the force from your opponent's side to neutral, thus disabling their card's force powers. If you purchase him on turn 1, the earliest you could see him is on turn 3, when both factions would have had their force card. So the rebels could still be at maximum force. If the Imperials got their Inquisitor first and lowered the force, then the rebels countered on their turn with their Temple Guardian. So as an Imperial player, don't be afraid to exile him on turn 3 to keep the rebels out of their end zone. Likewise, if the rebels got their force card on their first turn and nominated attack or resources because they're at maximum force, and then the Empire used their Inquisitor on their second turn to knock the force down a notch, a third turn Outer Rim pilot exile could restore the rebels back to maximum force. As a rebel player, you must not be complacent. As so many of your cards are enhanced by the force, you want to have as much of a buffer on the balance track as you can. For both factions, being in your end zone will either give you an extra resource when your turn comes around, which is all you need for a Y-Wing or a TIE Fighter, or it will prompt your opponent to dedicate effort into changing the balance of the force and maybe neglecting other areas of the game. Let's move on to the exile part. A card that exiles itself, particularly after it has been played and thus contributed force, resources or attack value, is supremely valuable. You don't want to be reliant on cards like IG-88 that require a setup condition. Even Quarren Mercenary or Keldoran Mystic may not come up in the Galaxy row, or your opponent may have purchased them instead of you. If you use the Mighty Jabba, he only exiles from your hand, so you won't get a force point or resources. Although, don't underestimate drawing cards, particularly if your opponent or you are on your last base. When the time is right for the next upgrade to your resource generators for something like Imperial Landing Craft or the Rebel equivalent, then exiling a pilot or preferably 2 pilots which you have just used to pay the 4 cost is perfect. Before we go, his flavor text is a quote from Obi-Wan saying most of the best freighter pilots are to be found here. Here being Mos Eisley. This is BoShek, a smuggler and pilot for hire originally from Corellia who appears in the Cantina scene in Star Wars A New Hope. He has appeared in many Star Wars games from FFG, and his latest incarnation, with the art getting a close-up, looks superb. He was portrayed by the late British actor Basil Tomlin, who also worked on films such as Quadrophenia, The Pink Panther Strikes Again, and The Ruttles, as well as several TV shows. He and his brother George also played stormtroopers in the same film, and you can see him in the original making of documentary. Like so many extras of the period, he was uncredited and his name wasn't generally known until 12 years after he passed away. But we're glad it is. Thanks for watching, and once more let us know what you think of this new style of video and if you want us to make another one. Thanks to Asmodee North America for providing us this spoiler card.